Hi, I'm Jack Scott from the Southern Adirondack Library System. Thank you for joining us. You can visit the Leaving Our Fingerprints on History collection at fingerprints.sals.edu or search for us using your favorite search engine and searching for Leaving Our Fingerprints on History. From here, you can visit the collection or take the survey. And now, on with the show. There are many things we found out about ourselves during the pandemic. Some of us discovered we make a mean sourdough starter. Others began gardening. We bought bikes. But some discovered that cutting one's own hair, even during a pandemic, is never a good idea.
If there was an upside to the pandemic, it involved fluffy, feathered, gilled, or hard-shelled critters. Animal shelters were emptied out as people extended their families or just spent more time cuddling with the wee beasties in their lives. Many reported that their pets were the bright spots, providing comfort and snuggles. I have 2 dogs, 4 parakeets, and a guinea pig. They've especially helped my daughter as she did not leave the house at all and really missed her friends. The dogs became her true best friends in all this.
Well, most of our questions brought out lengthy responses and philosophical treatises on, for example, while working alongside our pets, who gets use of the living room chair during the day? Pets were a source of comfort in uncertain times, but some of the shortest answers resonated the most. I have turtles. Nothing's changed with them. Sorry, no turtle photos, but enjoy these 2 lounging beagles declaring the chair is theirs during the day. Not all of us were able to work from home. Many of us were deemed essential workers, including everyone from healthcare professionals to frontline workers at grocery stores, municipal and state employees, and daycare providers, to name but a few. The pandemic challenged us to consider what we think of as essential. When we visited our local store and found the toiletry aisles lined with empty shelves, what did we think? I am an essential employee. I work at a converting mill where we make napkins and paper towels.
The pandemic has been a time of tremendous loss. In addition to a dramatic change in lifestyle, more than 600,000 people have lost their lives, and more than 35 million have contracted COVID. People gave us a peek into how they're dealing with both the collective and personal trauma that filled our lives. My dad died. I cooked a lot of the foods that he used to cook for us when we were little. I had some visits with my brother where we shared memories. Others bonded intensely during the adversity, and against all odds, found a port in the storm in the arms of another. I met a man, our first date on the day that businesses were due to close, and socializing was ending at 8 p.m. that night. He and I became fast friends, and we had a beautiful love affair. That relationship saved me and kept me feeling alive. We'd survive work during the day and seek solace with each other at night, cooking dinner, discussing every little change that came along, trying to make sense of the chaos and the dreaded unknown. And we made love. It healed us. It felt forbidden, but he was my lifeline.
We missed out on holidays, family gatherings, and all of us had a birthday during a pandemic. We made do in unexpected ways, meeting virtually, window meetings, car parades, and so much crafting. I turned 29 during a pandemic.
Hi, I'm Anya Bouchard, the Coordinated Outreach Librarian at Clinton Essex Franklin Library System. Perhaps you're wondering how the Leaving Our Fingerprints project began. Well, let's start at the beginning by traveling back to early 2020. It was a new year full of promise.
The pandemic disrupted our lives and ushered in a new way of living, working, and relating to each other. By late March, an executive order closed down non-essential businesses in New York. People were urged to practice social distancing and to only leave home for essential work or to obtain supplies. Many of us envisioned that it would probably take a couple of weeks for these closures to minimize the spread of the virus, and then everything would return to normal. However, as the infection rate spiked, the shutdown continued, spirits declined, and feelings of isolation were on the rise.
So how could we fight back to build and maintain community during a pandemic? With our only weapon, stories. Fellow Mary Misfit, Erica from Southern Adirondack Library System, noticed a post on Twitter that recommended keeping a journal through the COVID pandemic. She recalled how scientists, epidemiologists, and historians learned so much about the 1918 influenza pandemic from the journals they found. An idea started germinating to create an online survey that could be used to document life experiences during the current pandemic. By collecting these accounts of daily life during COVID-19, contributors could become witnesses to history. The stories could be submitted using words, images, and digital documents, opening the door to creative expression through artwork, poetry, photos, or even TikToks. Of course, these accounts truly become powerful once they are shared with others, so the project would also require a method of presentation. Erica gathered support for the idea and soon formed a committee to carry it out. What began as a small project started to take on a life of its own. It was originally intended to capture the stories of the 4 counties served by the Southern Adirondack Library System: Hamilton, Saratoga, Warren, and Washington. However, it soon became apparent that interest in the project would be far-reaching, as submissions were received from across the country and even other continents. Each response to the survey provided an intimate glimpse into people's lives by reflecting their hopes, fears, small triumphs, and devastating losses. The significance of this undertaking soon became clear to others. And here's Lori to tell you more about that.
Hi, I'm Lori Weiss, and I'm the local history librarian at Saratoga Springs Public Library. Back in March 2020, as we closed the doors of our library like so many others and walked to our cars, we looked around at each other, trying to be cheerful with a "see you on the other side" send-off. Within a few days, we started to more fully digest the magnitude of what was happening around us and began to realize we had not only a desire, but a responsibility to document our reactions to a defining event of our times. I began to explore what our options for capturing these responses might be. That same conversation was happening in many places, but most importantly for us, it was happening at the library directors meeting being held at the Southern Adirondack Library System. From that meeting, a small committee was formed. All of our meetings have been virtual. Maybe someday we will all meet in person. At times, we have invited guests to sit in and shared what we are doing in the hopes of expanding participation. And our original group of 4 has grown and evolved into the incredible band of Merry Misfits we are today. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Erica Freudenberger, the Outreach, Engagement, and Marketing Consultant for the Southern Adirondack Library System. As a community builder, I was worried about what would happen during the pandemic as we sheltered in place and people were really struggling with social isolation. How could we come together and remember the importance of connection in a time when being together could be deadly? And how could we create a people's history of the pandemic, capturing snapshots of our lives in the midst of turmoil?
Hi, I'm Jack, the Technology and Youth Services Librarian from the Southern Adirondack Library System. What first drew me to this project was the idea of sharing what it was like to experience a pandemic with future generations. My great-grandfather died during the 1918 pandemic, and I've always wondered what it was like for him and many others on a daily basis. This project gave me a chance to reflect on that and to share these experiences with future generations.
I'm Anya, the Coordinated Outreach Librarian at the Clinton Essex Franklin Library System. Shortly after COVID-19 began to impact our region, I started hearing comments about how we were all in the same boat. While these words certainly inspired a sense of unity, it didn't take long for social media to provide a more accurate statement acknowledging that we were all weathering the same storm, but we were not in the same boat. For example, some people loved the opportunity to work from home, but others found it stressful and lonely. Bare shelves in the stores meant that some of us had trouble buying our favorite items, while others didn't know when they would get their next meal. Everyone was struggling in their own way. So I became very excited when I was exploring the Southern Adirondack Library System website and stumbled across a survey that documented these experiences. I reached out to Jack Scott and asked if our library system could replicate the project. Not only did Jack welcome this, but he also invited us to join their efforts in collecting these important stories.
Hi, I'm LJ, the Outreach and Youth Consultant here at the Chautauqua Cattaraugus Library System. We are as far west as you can get in New York while still being in New York. I heard about this project from our executive director who wanted to know more and asked me to find out if this was something CCLS could support. Like most, I connect through stories and wanted to be part of this project, collecting a living history. Along the way, I've gotten to work with an awesome team and learn from the stories that continued to be shared.
Hello, my name is Michelle Isopo. I'm the Adult Services and Local History Librarian at Schuylerville Public Library. My director, Caitlin Johnson, was contacted by Erica Freudenberger, Outreach and Marketing Consultant from SALS. Caitlin said we would be interested in participating, and that was the beginning of my collaboration with the Leaving Our Fingerprints team. We were all working from home due to mandatory shutdowns, so we began meeting virtually. My interest in participating with this project was to be part of a team collecting narratives and primary source accounts of living through the COVID-19 pandemic for future research. This project was our way of doing this to help the next generation prepare.
Our camaraderie is tangible. It's amazing how much work we would actually get done amidst our never-ending joking and laughing. Hence, our choice for this format to present our project, to share with you the adventure we've been on. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a wild ride through the Leaving Our Fingerprints on History project.
Hello. There are three key components to leaving our fingerprints on history: collecting the stories, sharing the stories, and curating exhibits. When we began, we wanted respondents to be aware that we intended to collect and share their stories as a part of history. And because these are personal and intimate pieces of our lives, we wanted to protect people's privacy as best we could. Part 1. Collection. For our collection tool, we settled on SurveyMonkey, mainly because we have a subscription to this service. We are familiar with it, and it allowed people to submit additional files, like image files. Before we even started collecting stories, we wanted to protect our respondents. We are not Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Google. If you take the time to share your story, we will respect what you give us. This means that questions regarding name and location are not required. It means that if you submit a photo, we take the time to remove identifiable metadata like geolocation, even if you didn't know that it was embedded in your image file. For our survey tool, we wanted to give respondents the opportunity to respond on a variety of subjects, including how they were personally affected by the pandemic, how their family has been affected by the pandemic, and how their community navigated the pandemic. We began collecting in early May of 2020, and our survey is still open and receiving responses. You'll notice that while we did initially have a strong response to the survey, we have steadily received responses every month, giving us a broader range of stories during different eras of the pandemic. We wanted to try and keep the survey short, but what we discovered is that people were spending a lot of time responding, on average around 30 minutes, and they were expressing deeply personal experiences. As we read each response, we would get goosebumps, laugh, and at times get very choked up. I would like to note, I've attended a few presentations by other groups, and inevitably one of the questions that gets asked is, how would you scale your project down if you were a smaller institution or if you didn't have any funding? Turns out, that's us. The main response I've heard is, we would have used Google Forms as our survey tool. I usually cringe because that's what we decided to do at first. And here's why we didn't go that route. If you want to upload a file, your respondent has to have a Google account. and has to be signed into that Google account. This was an absolute deal breaker for us, as it removed anonymity and it put up an undue barrier. Part 2, sharing. The second stage in our project was, how are we going to share our collection? We made a conscious decision when we began collecting that we would display all of the responses that were submitted, regardless of content, as long as it related to the pandemic. We decided to use the Omeka platform as our display tool. The choice came down to several factors. One, Omeka is free, open source. Some members of our team were familiar with it, and this would be a good opportunity to learn more about Omeka and maybe use it for future projects. The other aspect that we liked about Omeka is that right out of the box, we could start sharing responses and images and add metadata to each item in the collection so that it became searchable. And while we aren't necessarily thrilled with Omeka's look and feel, we can always add more features and change how things look in the future, including adding additional options to display exhibits such as in a timeline, or potentially using Omeka S and collaborating with other institutions with a similar project. So Omeka allowed us to start small and gives us the potential to scale up. Part 3, curation. The third portion of our project, and as with all other stages is still ongoing, had us thinking about curating exhibits. I should restate here, just as I mentioned earlier, that all of the responses are included unedited on the website, and we feel very strongly that our collection of stories is an accurate telling of our tortuous journey. But when we create exhibits, we are not archivists. I believe that we have a different role, that of a curator. We feel that exhibits are not the permanent record, and so when we curate an exhibit, we do correct typos and misspellings. Many responses were done on mobile devices, and hopefully the future will forgive us for using such tiny keypads. Our collection of stories was collected during a pandemic that included a social justice movement, a presidential election, and a variety of wild conspiracy theories. One of our ongoing discussions has us thinking about misinformation and how we can present an exhibit on this subject, its historical context, while at the same time not giving it a platform to stand on. This project has kept us busy, allowed us to experiment and grow new skills, and kept us entertained during an extraordinary time. In the future, we would like to create a toolkit for others so they could avoid some of the hurdles we encountered. So stay tuned, explore the collection, and please feel free to submit your own response. Thank you for your time, and now on to LJ.
Hi, LJ here again to take a look at the redemption arc of our story, or in other words, why we rock. The longer we progress into this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic experience, we are constantly hearing about numbers, age groups, infection rates, tests administered, shots in arms, hospitalizations, and unfortunately deaths. Numbers paint such a small part of this picture though, and as humans, we react and connect better through stories. The shared experiences of our humanity, stories from our community. Part of what makes Leaving Our Fingerprint project different is the focus on our smaller communities and the continued snapshot into how our friends and neighbors are being impacted. Some submissions have come from overseas, and it's interesting to see how similar our experience have been. To dig into your local stories, you can explore the map feature to see where responses have been submitted from, or click in your area to read through those stories. Through the survey, community members are given a chance to share as much or as little of their experiences as they want. And we found that there are several shared experiences, such as learning how to work from home, changing family dynamics, and how education almost changed overnight. This propelled the Merry Misfits to start curating exhibits around these themes. Make sure to check in on those as they're constantly being added to and new exhibits created. The responses provided are unique to each person, and browsing through an exhibit starts to bring faces to this pandemic into focus. From neighborhoods coming together, I've gotten to know my neighbors much more. We meet in a parking lot for impromptu get-together while social distancing. People here at the lake have always been friendly. However, now, people seem to want to do more to make our community better by pitching in together on projects. There are stories of heartbreaking loss that so many have faced in the past year and a half. We've had our 67th wedding anniversary to celebrate my parents at the window of my mother's nursing home. My father and I sat outside, and it was all I could do not to cry. He had a boutonniere, she had a corsage, and they each had a piece of wedding cake. A few weeks later, he died of metastatic cancer. Our family told my mother via the window that her husband had died, and the social worker patted her arm. It was heart-wrenching. We as readers are given a rare glimpse into very personal experiences. It's been an honor to be able to organize some of these stories into exhibits and showcase all of the facets of how our friends have worked through the past 2 years and an impact felt by everyone. As the project has developed, we've started to see a timeline of experiences develop and how perspectives and stories change the longer we face this storm. As the project is ongoing, people are able to submit the survey again and again. LOF is capturing in real time the impact of this pandemic and how experiences are changing and staying the same. Now over to Michelle to take a look at what's next.
We had many challenges when we started working on this project. When our group began discussing the project ideas, the first challenge was how to gather responses and what questions we would ask to inspire conversation and thought-provoking stories. We wanted the project to capture the public's reaction and experiences through the pandemic. The questions were designed to elicit personal narratives without gaining too much information, risking the person's anonymity. Our primary concern was to ensure no personal information was available through the digital capture of answers and images that they submitted. Then, moving forward with over 200 participants' answers, we realized to create a searchable exhibit for research, the items would have to be tagged and Dublin Core metadata schema attached. We then realized the project would need to be archived and maintained. Finding the time to meet virtually from lockdown at home was not as difficult as when we went back to our workplaces and had to balance our project and time at each library and history room. Other challenges included reaching out to an audience through social media when people were already tired of online programs, homeschooling, and Zoom work meetings. Another challenge we faced was accessibility. When people had access to the survey, they were able to answer questions. We would like to open the survey up to more people that don't have online access and computers. The team discussed phone interviews and paper surveys. As the pandemic continually challenged us all, reading the heartfelt stories left many of us in tears as participants shared their experiences so openly with us. For future possibilities, we are exploring other alternatives for presenting exhibits. Some of us have even created programming for younger audiences to put together a paper journal, drawings, paintings, photographs, and even masked selfies exhibits. Finding ways to display physical exhibits incorporating the community's creative ways they have dealt with and navigated through the new normal of our life through the pandemic made this project worthwhile. The youth survey, after working through adult survey responses, our team also decided to design a survey for the younger community members as well. The survey needed to be changed to age-appropriate questions sensitive to children's experiences through the pandemic. That way, the children could tell their story in their own words. Working along with summer reading programs, Tales and Tales, many youth services librarians worked to encourage participation through many creative programs. Preserving the record. As we look forward, the future of this project depends on how to preserve the collection. We've been in contact with the New York State Library about possibility of preserving our records, but we're also thinking about other avenues for digital preservation. The goal is to preserve these records for the future generations for research and interest on how our generation navigated through an unprecedented worldwide pandemic.
When we left our offices to work from home on March 13th, 2020, we thought we'd be out of the office for a week or two until the pandemic was under control or vanquished altogether. As we drag ourselves into what looks like it's going to be the second year of COVID-19, my former self would like to offer current me and everybody else a giant hug, a weighted blanket, and comforting beverage of your choice. The world and the communities we inhabit are not the ones we left 17 months ago, and that's for the most part a really good thing. We've voyaged through the crucible of life during pandemic, which has prompted an overdue racial justice reckoning, repeated threats to our democracy, and came face to face with a tremendous inequity in this country, as we see some people make billions and others lose their jobs, homes, and even lives. Despite, or perhaps because of this collective trauma, people yearn to connect. This project created a platform for people to share their lives, their hopes, dreams, fears, celebrations, and sorrows, and to let them know that they'd been seen and weren't alone. Our team is made up of people from library systems that serve mostly rural communities, where social isolation was an issue long before the pandemic, and where community health may be measured by relationships between neighbors. By sharing our stories and people's direct experiences of the pandemic, we were able to come together during a difficult, chaotic time. It was an opportunity to highlight and celebrate lived experiences, to acknowledge the profound loss we were experiencing while trying to forge a new way forward. As we read the stories of our friends, neighbors, and distant yet intimate strangers, we connect to what makes us human: our angst, our love of furry beasties, and our resourcefulness in dealing with obstacles. It gave people a chance to stake their claim and speak their truth, and to add to the public record for future generations without being shaped by someone else's lens. This project required a lot of time, energy, and even deep thinking. It's not the work of any one person, but reflects the contributions, creativity, and overall fabulousness of people who are willing to come together to spin gold from straw. So a huge thanks to everyone on our team: Jack, Lori, Michelle, Anya, LJ, and the incomparable Jenny Shank, as well as our fearless director, Sarah Dallas. But we also want to thank the hundreds of people who have given us a glimpse into this moment of their lives. Our focus has been to gather and share these stories so we know we're not alone. When we encounter darkness, we find a way to create a spark that reminds us of the promise of light. As I reflect on the resilience of our communities and our collective determination to endure, I'm reminded that our power and ability to thrive is not rooted in the individual, but in our collective action, care, and compassion. As we dream of a post-COVID world, I think of a response to the question, what do you want future generations to know about the pandemic? One person wrote, value each other, make the phone call, write the note of encouragement, make time to spend together, value what matters. As we continue to support our communities, please remember, you matter, we matter, and the work we do matters more than ever. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, and please take time to contribute your story to the project, which only becomes stronger and more vibrant with each contribution.